Oh my goodness, there's a little person.
Could be a tiny.
Yeah. Oh gosh, sitting on somebody's knee.
That's what all the little tiny chairs are for.
Oh, right. It's just the way it looked like he was tiny, that was sitting on somebody's knee rather than on the little chair.
Okay, Linda, I'm going to go move back here and leave you alone to get started. In 2 minutes.
So does my does my presentation take over that top screen automatically?
I'm sorry, what was that?
Up on the main screen at the moment, it's got the Stella. Stella.
Oh, did you have to change the channel, remember?
Oh, I'd done all that earlier on.
Yeah, but somebody may have come in and reset the screen, so you just need to change the channel to VIDM. So you have to choose A, B, or C, and then you have to choose the class. Then you'll be okay.
Okay.
Just on your HUD.
Yep.
Still setting up my recording system.
Doesn't seem to have made any difference, Lorraine. Can I reset and do it that way?
Okay, Linda. So you have your HUD on, right?
Yep.
Okay. Choose a different channel. If it's on B, choose A, whatever. There we go. I see something happening.
And now do the select class.
Choose the class.
Okay. Oh, there we go. So will that also start my chat as well?
At the beginning.
Good. Oh, see, I knew that was a bit too straightforward. I've had this set up since about 9 o'clock this morning.
Okay, I'm turning it over to you.
Okay.
You can introduce yourself and away you go.
Okay.
Let me start recording. 3.
Okay, I was just checking for the
1.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Linda Wylie. I am a retired midwifery educator who lives in Scotland in the UK. And I work with Lorraine, who's here today, on a virtual conference called the Virtual International Day of the Midwife. So Lorraine, of course, has kept us interested in this conference, as obviously a parallel. And I decided to be very brave or foolish and submit an abstract this year to do a presentation myself. But I have to say it has been a very interesting and challenging experience. So I cannot see the text, however, Lorraine, on my thingamajiggy. Should it be visible at the moment?
You need to click that the big box that has VWBPE in it. There you go.
Oh, yeah, it's not started. It started at a later stage actually than the actual presentation. However, it'll catch up, I guess. Okay, so what I'm speaking about this afternoon, in my time, is whether or not we have a social responsibility towards conferencing and should be veering towards virtual conferences rather than face conferences. So my outcomes or my plans for the session are to look at face-to-face conferences and their cost to the planet and their lack of equity and equality, etc. To look at the challenges and opportunities of moving towards more of an online system, and also to introduce you to the Virtual International Day of the Midwife, the conference that I'm involved with which is not in Second Life, but is in a different platform. And then also hope that at the end we can all have a discussion about what the future will hold. So, face-to-face conferences. I don't know about yourselves, but I have jetted off in all directions during my academic career to attend conferences in various parts of the world. And it wasn't until fairly recently that it occurred to me that there might be a cost to this. And this has become known around here as carbon footprint guilt. Do you have carbon footprint guilt? How many flights have you taken as an academic to conferences? I have to admit, my carbon footprint as an academic never occurred to me, although it did for holidays. I'm a midwife by trade, latterly in academia, but I'm neither a researcher nor an eminent member of the academic profession. So I never used to attend many conferences. It was a fairly rare thing. I would attend conferences locally, but not further afield. So towards the end of my career, however, I looked a little bit enviously at others as they flew off to all kinds of exotic locations to present a one-hour paper. And I must admit, I purposefully set out to go to some of these myself by submitting abstracts in a variety of interesting-looking conferences. And indeed, I did experience some of the delights of the conference circuit. But it was not until a couple of years ago when I was working on the Virtual International Day of the Midwife conference that someone said to me about the virtual conference I helped to organise that conference cost the planet nothing. So I then became more interested in the values of international face-to-face conferences. Do they benefit anybody? Do we get much out for the academic world by jetting off to international conferences all over the world? I suggest that there are actually very few benefits to such. But when I looked into this, I discovered that the same discussion has gone back for far more years than I actually expected. Back in 2008, in my own profession, a debate raged in the British Medical Journal. A physician was horrified to discover the cost of the of the international meetings and conferences physicians were attending. The title of the debate was Face-to-Face or Virtual International Conferences. Will our carbon footprint determine the choice? And there it is in a nutshell, really. These eminent surgeons debated the costs, and one side said there was a need to move to virtual conferencing as it would set a good example to others. His conservative estimate of travel by physicians to conferences was 6 billion person miles a year, 600,000 tons of carbon. And that was in 2008, and it's probably changed dramatically. I'm sorry, hang on a minute, I was just looking for my text here. The counter debate, though, by one of his colleagues was that by going to international conferences and meeting face to face, this is where innovations and ideas are sparked off, both by the presentations and in coffee rooms. But does this happen? I have to say I didn't notice this terribly often. More recently, in the University of California, scholars estimated that air travel for their campus burns up about a third of that campus's carbon footprint, which was equal to the annual carbon footprint of a city of 20,000 people in the Philippines. An interesting analogy, I have to say. So these academics threw out a challenge to all universities, associations, and societies to reduce flying and dramatically decrease the university's carbon footprint. This is challenging, of course. There's a great attraction to international travel. You meet new people, you go new places, you hear that charismatic speaker in the flesh. But is this selfish? I think so. I do not think this is socially responsible. So moving on, hopefully, to the next slide. This is a slide, a graph of the number of grams of carbon dioxide per passenger kilometre by means of transport. And as you can clearly see, flying far outstrips all other methods of travelling, twofold at the very least, and much more in comparison with other methods of transport. So if it's so necessary to attend face-to-face meetings or conferences, perhaps we should only travel by train, which is at the least number of grams of carbon dioxide on that graph, and only hold international conferences within maybe 24 hours of a train journey. So going back to my social responsibility of face-to-face conferences, so let's return to the debatable points around attending and holding these. They're very wasteful, both in terms of money and in terms of resources. Consider the expense to the university and therefore to the student and taxpayer of sending academics to conferences. Conference fees are very high, and then there's the cost of the flight, the hotel, and of course time. If you travel halfway around the world to attend a conference, this takes a considerable chunk of time out of a person's personal and professional life. Conferences are also wasteful in terms of the Earth's resources. Plastic water bottles seem to be numerous at conferences. Swag bags, you know about swag bags? Cotton bags that are never reused, containing advertising flyers that may or may not be recyclable, maybe small gifts. So they're very wasteful in that respect. They're also inequitable, I would suggest. Only those and such as those go to a conference. Senior academics and managers, not the grassroots worker. As I said, I think, I'm a midwife, and midwives in my country who work as midwives at the shop floor, if they want to go to conference, they have to pay for their own, and they have to attend on their days off. They're not the ones who get such things as paid for conferences. Yes, I noticed that I've picked up a few bits and pieces while I've been here, and my inventory is a little bit awash of goodness only knows what. And as this is my first experience in Second Life, I don't know what to do with all those things in my inventory. But however, it's the same in real life, isn't it? So conferences then are also inequitable from terms of who can access them. Most international conferences cannot be accessed by everybody within that profession. People who live in resource-poor countries cannot possibly afford to go to most international conferences. The next conference held by my profession, which is held only every 3 years, is in Bali. Actually, it was meant to be in June in Bali, but it's in next June in Bali now, obviously, in Bali. And the idea is to enable local people to attend. But even if you lived in Bali, the cost of those conferences just to attend is prohibitive of these people. So it is inequitable from the point of view of enabling everybody to attend equally. So I think the time has come to realise that continuing with face-to-face international conferences and meetings does not set a good example to others. And as well-educated, informed professionals certainly does not meet our social responsibility. As an aside, in the UK, people are beginning to realise very quickly that meeting in person is not necessary. A headline in the papers last week is already pointing out how unnecessary travel to meetings is, and conferences obviously as well. The government here in the UK recently gave the go-ahead to a project to spend billions of pounds on a faster train service from London up north. And this has been very controversial, as it will destroy swathes of beautiful countryside with very little proven benefit. I think it cuts the journey time down by about half an hour or something. The headline in the paper said, "Coronavirus proves that HS2, that's the name of the project, is not needed as executives turn to Skype." I think there might be some interesting changes in the world once we're allowed out of our houses again. Okay, so moving on to virtual conferences, though, is not all plain sailing, even if the technology is easy, which it often isn't. Within my own profession, there's a professional fear of social media, and therefore virtual conferences come underneath that headline, really, and are not considered to be very acceptable. And this is because in my own profession, there are issues of patient care and confidentiality. So over the last couple of weeks, we've seen schools and colleges shut at a moment's notice. And our colleagues are expressing their discomfort with the whole process of becoming virtual, becoming forced upon them immediately. Many have no experience and no training in this. It's not an easy process. So moving to a virtual world is not an acceptable process for many, and they need to be persuaded. Now is the time to persuade them. Most institutions will have video conferencing software, but they don't use it. Well, do they use it? I know some use it very well, but the ones I've experienced use it very little. And that's a shame. And I spent a lot of my time before I retired trying to encourage people to use the virtual conferencing software for lunchtime meetings, to hear about each other's research, etc. But with very little success, I'm sorry to say. And critics will also say that so much missing with an online conference, especially one when you can't see the speaker or the audience. Body language is missing. You cannot respond to encouraging facial expressions. Verve and passion are lost. But does it really encourage interaction between speaker and audience in the real world? With 1,000 people in an auditorium either, I suggest. It's very difficult to get a lot of interaction either. Maybe the people who you really need to speak to are the ones that you don't actually come across. And in the breakout sessions, the concurrent sessions in the real world, over-enthusiastic speakers often overrun their time, leaving questions unanswered anyway. So there are big disadvantages to face-to-face conference. Then there are the spontaneous conversations in the dinner line over coffee that allegedly spark new thoughts and studies. There has been some interest in this, and it's quite debatable that attendance at conferences actually impact output at all. So a face-to-face conference then is a one-off occasion to hear papers and delegates list more sessions than they attend, with a number, sometimes a huge number, of concurrent streams. So moving to a virtual world may not lose anything too much from what you gain in a face-to-face conference. I can think of a multitude of ways to enhance audience interaction with virtual conferences. It costs very little to organise. Therefore, lunchtime follow-ups for interested parties can be organised. The sessions are recorded and can be played again and again, and they stimulate new thoughts for months and years in the future. So I want to ask you in the audience, don't want to speak for too long, do you find that this conference gives you opportunities to discuss ideas and projects? Can it be done? Yes. Can everybody give me any examples of how you managed to have these conversations? Please speak, whoever that was.
Well, it's Evelyn, the girl recording. The way we can do conferencing in 3D using such as virtual worlds like SL and OpenSyn, is that even possible?
I don't know.
You don't know, right? But yeah, but when it comes to education, I'm talking about.
Okay. Can you repeat the question then? You were a little bit quiet.
I was a little bit quiet because the mixer here. Well, is there any way to do a conference relating to education for the people in the UK, using OpenSyn and SL, something like that?
Using Second Life?
Yes.
Well, I have colleagues who have used Second Life for conferencing, for activities, not conferencing necessarily. So I see no reason why anybody could not organise something like this. I'm not suggesting that it's not possible to do virtual conferences. I'm just asking at this point in the presentation whether you think having virtual conferences takes away from the opportunities to actually sit down, have a chat with somebody in a similar field of work, and exchange ideas and encourage new projects, etc. Is it possible to do that with video conferencing?
Can I speak to that, please?
Please do.
Absolutely, yes, is my answer. Not only through this conference that I've been coming to for many, many years, I've been able to speak with, collaborate with people that otherwise I would have never met. One example would be Lysenna. I was able to work with Lysenna through her Whole Brain Health to coordinate, my teachers with her program to get professional development going for them. Another example would be I was able to meet physics. It's hard to find physics teachers around here. I've met numerous physics teachers that I've been able to collaborate with different projects for my students. So it's been a direct positive for me, my students, for the other person, and for their students. It's a win-win all around, all the while not having to fly anywhere.
Absolutely. So how did you actually meet up with these people? How do you find that physics teacher in a virtual world like this?
Well, it depends on what groups you get into. Second Life is so vast in how many things that you're capable of doing. You can choose to go to nightclubs. You can choose to do this or that. But, if you choose to join a group such as the Science Circle or such as an educational group, you will find like-minded people.
So this is not just during the conference, but beyond it.
That is correct. That is correct.
Right. So it's really opening.
Someone just said, look at their profiles, see what they're interested in their profile. Mm-hmm. And that is also true. But I've found that joining different scientific communities, joining educational communities has been the best route for me to be able to link up with people who are interested in the same things that I am.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so you have the opportunities, but maybe in a different way with virtual conferences. So those people who say that you're not going to have the eureka moments when you're not meeting people face to face are probably needing just to rethink the way in which they're going to do this at conferences and online. You've actually jumped ahead of me because I have said something similar to this in just a moment, funnily enough. Okay, has anybody else got any comments just now? Right, so community, that's a lot, that's community over a length of time and not just within this conference then. It's a kind of a bigger pull, really. Mind you, I think being a visitor to your community, I have obviously not seen what there is available as yet and the opportunities, so I'm only seeing it as a one event, a 3-day conference, and I cannot see beyond that at the moment because I'm not used to Second Life, I suppose. Maybe now I've dipped my toe in the water, I might come back and see a little bit more about this because Lorraine's spoken about this for many years. Okay, so let's move on then. So, virtual conferences, I think, are more inclusive, more inventive, and more useful. And I suggest that academics must lead by example. It's our social responsibility to lead the way. We're the experts. Let's use that expertise to create this model, which is more inclusive, more inventive, and more useful. We need to move away from thinking of the disadvantages of not meeting at exotic locations around the world and experiment with alternative models. And virtual alternatives are more economical, more accessible, and dramatically reduce our carbon footprint. We've seen this just now. So I want to talk a little bit about how virtual conferences can be introduced in academia and the rest of the world based on a series of thoughts by Levine et al., which is in the references at the end. They are trying to stimulate debate and reduce the carbon footprint of academic learning by considering the different ways in which virtual conferences can be organized. Sorry, I'm just trying to see which slide I'm on from the HUD. This is also new to me. Okay, so Levine et al. Has suggested a variety of things that we can do. And these can be from some minor adaptations to major adaptations and ideas such as Second Life. Okay, so we could consider holding fewer face-to-face conferences, maybe one every other year. This would minimize the carbon impact. Maybe also think about minimizing the carbon impact by the way in which it is run, serving vegetarian food, using digital rather than paper programs, minimizing swag, provide food and water in compostable, reusable containers. But we could also start moving towards the virtual process slowly by having fewer speakers and organizing regional conferences and getting keynotes to be streamed in to all the regional conferences and connect them that way. And this would be one way to introduce the virtual side of it. I have been to a couple of conferences recently where one of the keynotes has not been able to travel to the conference. They didn't have the time, so it was streamed in and it worked very well. Now I'm talking about in a world where I'm used to a virtual conference, but practically nobody else that I'm with is used to a virtual conference. So that to them is something very new and it's worked pretty well. I think by doing that, it reduces the opportunity for questions somewhat because the audience doesn't quite know how to handle it. So I don't think we can move over to a virtual world in one big step like has happened in the last few weeks very usefully. I think it has to be done a little bit more carefully. So we can invite keynotes to speak by video, which is a useful thing to do. We can encourage eureka moments by building online communities. Now, who was it who was talking about that just now? See, I told you I had it ahead of me. So these are rapidly expanding at the moment as we deal with this coronavirus. So what we need to do once the crisis has passed, hopefully, is to build on them in the new world and not let them lapse. You and I, who are already persuaded that virtual conferencing and meetings and communities are a very good way of going ahead and save the planet much more, we need to make sure our voice is heard. You've done it. Let's keep this going, the online communities, etc. The only thing is there needs to be a lot more replanning by going online. It's not possible to run an online conference exactly like a face-to-face conference, but it can be adapted. Our international conference I mentioned about in Bali was due to have 20 concurrent streams, as well as all the usual keynotes, panels, and couture, etc. So that would not be possible. Well, it could be possible, would probably not sensible in a virtual conference. When conferences are delivered virtually, there's no need to program so many sessions in a short period of time. Let's face it, by accepting a huge number of concurrent presentations at a face-to-face conference, you guarantee yourself an audience and a financially viable conference. But these could be spread out over regular, shorter virtual conferences because they cost nothing and we're not traveling all over the place to get to them. So let's look at the virtual International Day of the Midwife, if you don't mind. Now, this is not Second Life virtual conferencing. This is, to me, Lorraine will kill me, a much simpler form of video conferencing. I have to admit to you people that I have been seriously challenged by coming into Second Life to do this. Seriously challenged. I consider myself to be quite technically good, but I have been wondering why I ever said yes, because this is such a big difference to anything I've ever met before, so to speak. Thank you very much, Lorraine. However, let me tell you about the virtual International Day of the Midwife. This is what to me a truly inclusive, inventive and useful conference, and epitomizes buying into our social responsibility to the world. And this conference started 13 years ago as a local online conference organised by our founder, Sarah Stewart, who's been a presenter here, on her kitchen table. It was just a local one. But now, 13 years later, and as for all the time that I've been involved, which is 8 or 9 years maybe, it's truly international with speakers and keynotes from around the world. We have 6 continents this year represented and 15 countries from all areas of the world, equally accessible to resource-rich and resource-poor presenters. And these include students, midwives, consumers, and academics. Anybody really who has something to say about our profession's world. It's free to attend, free to review via recorded sessions on our channel, Virtual Midwives on YouTube. And I know this is also free and also free to view thereafter as well. And it's therefore a great resource for future students and academics as well as present day ones. I would suggest, therefore, the VIDM is a more sustainable conference in that the information given is available to more scholars for a longer period of time. So the VIDM is technology without any ribbons and bows or avatars and fancy dresses and beautiful things like that. We keep it as simple as possible. In fact, we don't even have a video stream at present, and this is to enable all delegates to attend however poor their internet connection. And for our purposes, it's held over a 24-hour period, 24 one-hour sessions over a 24-hour period. And that's because we are celebrating a significant day in the calendar of midwifery, which is the International Day of the Midwife. And this year it's held in the International Year of the Nurse and Midwife. And little did we imagine that the International Year of the Nurse and the Midwife was going to be like this. And it's only the beginning of this crisis that we're in. The VIDM has some of the elements of a traditional face-to-face conference. We have keynote speakers, concurrent sessions, workshops, and posters. And next year, we're hoping to adapt the poster presentations by attaching podcasts of explanation about the posters. Some of the sessions are in languages other than English. We've got Spanish ones this year. Last year, we had Spanish, French, and Italian, Lorraine, I think. And these are translated to some extent. And this year we've introduced a student stream, although this doesn't cover 24 hours. Students get very little opportunity to attend conferences at all. So we wanted to give them the opportunity, students from all over the world, the opportunity to come attend and speak at a conference. The trouble is we still need to sell the concept of virtual conferences. And that's why perhaps we haven't got many abstracts submitted this year from students. This is the program, the digital program. We use a number of rooms within our virtual software suite due to the constraints of the technology in order to have discrete recordings of each session. And it's almost a bit like attending a face-to-face conference at times, finding the way around the conference centre to the breakout rooms. The digital program, which Lorraine has constructed, is found on our website, and it contains the links to each of the sessions and their timings. And unlike face-to-face conferences, transports you to the right room once you understand the process. And indeed, this is wonderful in Second Life as well, to be able to transport, I'm a Star Trek person, to the room in which we are presenting and meeting. And we do our timings in Coordinated Universal Time, UTC, to try and make it a little bit easier to organise a conference across time zones, which is challenging to say the least. I double checked with Lorraine twice today, I think, about what time my session was due to start, because even when I put it into the time zone converter, I discovered there were 2 different types of Pacific time at 2 different times of the day. So I was very confused. Easily confused. And this is a screenshot of one of our sessions It's not a current one, because I don't have a current one. This was previously a previous year, but it's the concept's just the same. We have no video as such. You'll see in the center of the screen is the presentation itself. You'll see that it's definitely a midwifery conference. And on the right-hand side, we have the chat box. And everybody absolutely loves the chat box because they can meet up with people, have a chat, and they can ask the most famous midwives in the world questions, which is something they would never have a chance to do normally. So it's very simple, and it can be picked up on tablets. And in fact, I've said that on the next slide. It's easily accessible on PC, tablet, and smartphone. So what does virtual conferencing technology have to look like? Well, Second Life is one. Our very simple system is another. There are many others, and there are many others that are very fancy that cost money. So not everything is free on the internet. But there is a lot of different platforms freely available to professionals. I'm sure you know that. I'm not a technology expert. And the VIDM is hosted by Frontier University in the USA and streams through Big Blue Button. I noticed that Lorraine had mentioned Big Blue Button there in the text. We used Adobe Connect in previous years, but this carried a cost. So we've moved on to Big Blue Button because one of the big principles of the VIDM is that it is, well, we're all volunteers who organise it. We have absolutely no funding at all. We have a couple of sponsors that help out with emails, websites, and hosting the conference. But other than that, we have no money. So we're trying to set an example and show people that however resource poor they might be, it is possible to put on a virtual conference. It's not the domain of the rich or the rich West. So academic institutions will have a video conferencing package available to them, but whether it's ready in use is another matter. Certainly when I retired, it was very seldom that we used that. I said that before. I find that many academics are very apprehensive of live streaming classes, but they've had a bit of a rush into this now, having had to move to a home working routine and having to speak to their students online. They are learning right now. Yes, they are. So all our VIDM sessions are 1 hour long. They're live streamed and recorded. And I've said all that already. I don't know how I've said that twice. So we're not using the video at present to reduce the risk of delegates losing connection. However, this does happen anyway when the generator or solar panels run out of fuel. One of the great things about the VIDM is that you hear in the background what's going on. And we have had sessions that have been presented where you can hear the chickens in the background. And you can envisage the kind of background to where these people are presenting from. But that's, to us, is absolutely wonderful. Our sessions mimic face-to-face conferences where we have a chair, a facilitator, who introduces the session and directs the questions and discussion. And the speakers are allocated a facilitator early in the planning who work with them on a one-to-one basis to ensure that they are able to use the simple technology. A colleague of mine, I persuaded her to give us to do us a presentation on her research, and she would only do that provided she came round to my house and sat in my house where I could solve her problems with the technology. And she still found it really scary, and I find that so hard to comprehend. So, I mean, there is a message there, really, isn't it? We're the converted here today. But how do we convert and persuade other people that we should be considering carbon footprints and going online, apart from forcing them through a coronavirus? We also have experienced members of the committee in the background to kind of oversee the whole process. So we don't only offer a virtual conference, but we also give speakers and facilitators experience in online video conferencing, which is good for their CV. So I want to bring the discussion back to the audience now, if you don't mind. And I want to ask, what does the future hold? And I've got 3 things I want to ask here and see if you have any opinions about. And in fact, I think one of them, virtual reality, I think someone's speaking about virtual reality. I was that busy with my own presentation. I looked down the program, but I haven't dared move away from this lecture theatre, because when I did that, I actually fell out the bottom of it, and it took me ages to get myself back onto the thing again. So I have been sitting in the seat for about 3 days. Anyway, so what do you think? Is virtual reality the net of the future? And are there likely to be any problems there? Is it likely to be more realistic? Are there any risks to the technology? There's a big debate going on in my own profession about 5G and whether or not this is dangerous to the unborn child and such like. And what do we think the world will look like post-COVID-19? Has anybody got any opinions?
I have an opinion.
Oh, that's quick.
This is about VR and not VR. I mean about coronavirus in general. When you get in a lockdown, we get like very locked around the situations we are at our homes, and the only option we have to do like conferences and stuff is online or in SL or in OpenSim or in something like that. And regarding 5G, this may be dangerous to our people around the world, because if it is, imagine a children playing with a cell phone, suddenly touches that cell phone, and that cell phone is broadcasting 5G, and then suddenly the cell phone starts hitting and hitting and hitting. Then, yeah, that is the power of 5G in the child, on the children part. But yes, the world is evolving our technologies, and technologies must be there for the evolutions, and that's how the world is, to be honest. 5G is going to bring a lot of advantages, but at the same time may hurt our skins.
Mm-hmm.
That's my opinion.
Yes. So it's to some extent maybe it's the survival of the fittest kind of thing. Really, we're evolving into more of a online society. We're just going to have to accept costs, are we?
Yes, that's right.
What does anybody else think? Is there any risk to 5G? I see somebody has made a comment about serious meetings going on with avatars and role play. I was wondering what that meant. Are you suggesting that this is not a serious presentation because we've got avatars and a beautiful space station here? Any thoughts, anybody? Is that a goodness no, Lorraine, that this is not a serious conversation?
I do have to say that eventually the newness and the funness of this wears off, and the seriousness does come through.
Still being very new to this, I wouldn't know about that yet. But then this is a serious conversation. Yes, I'm totally serious here. So do you think that virtual reality will be available soon for us to actually be appear to be within a face-to-face conference online? Do you think that's a possibility soon? Has anybody any experience of VR? I've got absolutely none. So. Sorry?
It is a possibility, I think, because when it comes to like having things such as like the things said before, it may actually not prejudice people. It's actually going to be very revolutionary for all people around the world, and that's what I think about that.
A VR. You talk about virtual reality.
Yeah, virtual
I
reality.
kind of think it might be a bit more acceptable than this, to be honest. If you can put on a pair of, I've never done this, but if you could put on a pair of glassy things, whatever they are, visors, and be transported into what looks like a usual face-to-face conference, that might feel a little bit more acceptable to people.
Exactly, and that is what Second Life is. It is if you put a VR headset, you can do VR within Second Life, and there is this so longly failed sensor which used to do the same thing. Thanks God, London Lab sold sensor recently, and I know a friend that knows everything about VR. His name is Drexter Dupre. He's also a videographer like me, and he does VR things and like that. He's a very awesome VR thing, but he's not here in the event.
Okay. So that's definitely a possibility. We're also a little bit worried about the technology. So what do you think is going to happen once this COVID-19 crisis passes? Do you think that's going to make a difference to our academic colleagues who as yet or previously were not particularly interested or engaged in the possibilities of virtual conferences? Depends on several things. There'll be a virtual backup plans for every conference. We actually volunteered. We volunteered to my international conference when it was obvious it was going to have to be not be on this year. We offered them our expertise as virtual conferencing people, but they've actually decided to postpone it rather than put it online. It would have been very difficult to put online anyway, but not impossible. So you think that people will move on to virtual alternatives? Do you think? Okay. Yes, maybe they will, Lorraine, I don't know. So do you think that therefore that we might see a change in sufficient of a change to actually save the planet from our disgraceful carbon footprint as academics? Sorry? Well,
Somebody said no. Who was that somebody who said no?
No, who said no? Speak up.
Well, I do want to say that having virtual conferences and cutting down on everything is an excellent move. And I believe that once this whole fiasco is over, once this emergency is over, people will realize, yes, we can do this. Yes, we need to do this. And yes, we need to have this at very least, as a backup for us to be able to do. But I do not think it's going to change the problems of our world regarding climate change.
You don't think there'd be a big enough shift to at least allow the academics to reduce theirs dramatically and therefore
I agree 100%. If the reduction, any kind of reduction, even if it's dramatic in a certain sector, but we need a lot more than just one sector with reducing emissions.
That's true. Yes, it might not save the planet, but it might help. Every little change is going to make a bit of a difference, I think. Okay, so does anybody else have any questions or comments to make in order to allow you all to move on to the next session?
On YouTube, I think there's a question. It is perhaps, no, there's no question YouTube. Oh, I thought there was a question YouTube. I would read then.
Well, I hope. I mean, I'm in lockdown. I'm sitting in my conservatory, looking out at the garden as I present this, and I have to say that's quite a nice thing to do. And it hasn't distracted me too much. Well, it hasn't distracted me at all because this is all very nerve-wracking. But I forgot what I was going to say then. Oh, so I personally hope and will continue to push to the world the concept of virtual conferences. I think you can get a lot out of them. And I'm more to the point, I absolutely love the aspect of virtual conferences in that it's equally accessible to all. I do think it's a bit of a disgrace that you have to be from a resource-rich country in order to afford to go to conferences. It's people who would gain so much from conferences and the education just can't afford to go. So at least if nothing else, the virtual conferencing makes that an equal opportunity for people. So thank you very much, everybody, anyway, for coming to the session. I hope it was useful. I do feel a bit that we're preaching to the converted here, but it's given you a few ideas as to how to influence your colleagues who are not so keen on virtual worlds to make some changes, perhaps. Thank you. That's all we're looking for. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Well done, Linda. And for my part, I just want to say thank you very much for being so brave and doing this for us. I think it was very timely and we learned a lot. Thanks.
Thank you. I do feel quite brave.
I'll make sure that you get the link once the video is up, so now you can share it.
Well, it certainly went better than either of the dress rehearsals, so that's fine. So are there two more concurrent sessions going on elsewhere now next? I did see something pop up.
Yes, there's other sessions that are coming along. We have another one. We have one on VR, as a matter of fact, and we also have one on language learning. Those will be up. So keep an eye on in the group or look in the program and head on over. Let's get out
Right,
of
well, it's
here.
dinner time here, so I shall need to head off and find some dinner in a minute.
Okay.
But I will come back.
Yeah, all you have to do is remove your HUD and you're good to go.
How do I do that?
Just click on it on the screen and say detach.
Excellent job, Linda. And everybody, I have a backup recording of this if needed.
Thank you very much.
There it went. Okay.
Okay.
And if I move myself,
I'll
as
get
well,
that
backup.
note card from you, Linda, and then or a copy of your talk, and then I'll share it to people that asked me. So if you want a copy of the talk, just let me know. Thanks.
yes, because that disappeared and I had no idea where it was. So there you go.
Yeah,
I just went
that's okay.
ahead.
So just send it to me, and then I'll make a note card and share it with people.
I think
And
I've already
yes.
sent it.
And yes, this has been recorded here by myself under the services being provided to VWBPE by not only the University of New Mexico and Melbourne's Better World Broadcasting, but also by my company, Sandiz, spelled SANDIZ, Media Conglomerate and Associates, a brand new company that will do media services in Second Life alongside having a radio station. And in the future, we'll be also owning a traditional TV station that Second Life also used to have, but it will be returning, I think, but I can't say the name of that station. Hint, hint.
Okay, everyone, on to the next session.